Here are the top 3 reasons why every Horizon Forbidden West player should be using a Bolt Blaster. 1, they're awesome. 2, they're awesome. And 3, they're awesome. But also sometimes they're not awesome. Boltblasters are the epitome of high risk, high reward. They're some of the most powerful weapons in the game, but their power comes at the expense of speed and mobility, 2 things which are really important if you're gonna survive the Forbidden West. So how do you know if the risk is worth the reward? We're gonna break it all down. Hi everyone, I'm Chaz, and today we're gonna be talking all about the best Boltblasters in the game. And there's actually quite a few good ones, so I'll be giving a couple of different examples from each of the different rarity types. But before we dive in, let's talk about what makes Boltblasters such a great option to begin with and what the trade-offs are involved in using them. And that's really the key theme when it comes to using Boltblasters, is what is that trade-off? Because there is typically some sort of trade-off, not just when we're comparing Boltblasters with other different weapon types, but also when we're comparing Boltblasters with each other. But let's get started with some of the basics. Boltblasters are rapid-fire weapons designed for dealing massive damage. They fire bolts that are capable of dealing impact damage and elemental damage at buildup, but not tear. So they're no good for trying to strip a machine of its parts. And there's a couple of things that you can do to make them even more powerful than they already are, starting with critical hits. Critical hits on Boltblasters deal 2x damage, which is the second highest damage multiplier of any of the weapon types, but only happen naturally 10% of the time. Now because of their rapid rate of fire, even at just 10%, you still have a good chance of dealing at least 1 or 2 critical hits on every round of bolts fired. But anything that we can do to either increase our critical hit chance or our critical hit damage through coils or weapon perks is going to be a really good option. Now another good offensive option for coiling our Bolt Blaster, aside from just doubling down on critical hits, is to use close range damage coils. Close range damage coils provide a damage buff against enemies within 10 meters, which is pretty up close and personal, but Bolt Blasters are no good at range, so these coils are always another good option. Now the biggest challenge with Bolt Blasters, of course, is just how slow they are and how long it takes them to reload. I can't tell you how many times I've been hit or killed just waiting for my Bolt Blaster to reload, and it can be really annoying. But through coils and weapon perks like increased reload speed or increased draw speed, you can help negate some of the slowness so you won't be left quite as vulnerable. Personally though, I prefer offensive damage coils to the more defensive passive boost ones, but those are an option for you if you're struggling with using the Bolt Blaster and you want to make it a little bit quicker. Some other quick tips for reloading your Bolt Blaster include taking advantage of shock. If a machine is weak to shock and you have a shock weapon equipped as your quick swap weapon, you can simply quick swap to your shock weapon when you need to reload, shock the machine, and then once they're immobilized, you can swap back to your Bolt Blaster, reload, and continue on your way. Smoke bombs are also very useful and definitely more effective when going up against groups of machines. Throwing down a smoke bomb will put all nearby machines in the confused state, which will give you more than enough time to reload. There's also a few weapon techniques for the Bolt Blaster that you're going to want to familiarize yourself with, and you want to prioritize getting them and upgrading them in your skill tree. The best 2 weapon techniques in my opinion are the Sustained Burst weapon technique, which is my personal favorite, and the Spread Shot weapon technique. The Sustained Burst weapon technique essentially turns your Bolt Blaster into a machine gun capable of firing a constant burst of bolts at the enemy. The rapid rate of fire makes it extremely powerful, but once again it comes with a trade-off. The Sustained Burst technique can't deal critical hits, so you're missing out on that max damage potential. The second weapon technique that I like is the Spread Shot weapon technique, which basically turns your Bolt Blaster into a shotgun. Now the Spread Shot technique can deal critical hits, so it's a good way to maximize damage, but the trade-off here is that it isn't very accurate and has a very short range. But now that we've laid the foundation, let's talk about the best Bolt Blasters in the game, starting with what I think is the best rare blue Bolt Blaster, the Plasma Bolt Blaster. The Plasma Bolt Blaster has advanced bolts, which makes it the strongest blue Bolt Blaster in terms of impact damage. And what makes it even better is the fact that you can simply buy it from the merchant at Shearside Mountains for shards and machine parts, so you really don't have to go too far out of your way to get it. The amount of impact damage this one deals makes it a great mid-game weapon, and is definitely worth the time and resources needed to upgrade it to its max level. Now this one does also come with plasma bolts, which you may or may not be keen to use, but the Shearside Hunting Grounds does have a plasma challenge, and this Bolt Blaster is perfect for that. If you're in need of some quick and easy hunting ground medals, myself, Artix, and Honest Cake recently made a guide to get full stripes on the Shearside Mountain Hunting Grounds, which I'll link in the description below, so be sure to check it out. But moving on to the next blue Bolt Blaster that I really like, the Hammer Burst. Now, all the other blue Bolt Blasters deal more impact damage than the Hammer Burst, but I really like the weapon perks on this one. It gives us an additional 15% critical hit chance, which is really going to help us maximize damage with critical hits. If you equipped two 10% critical hit chance coils, you're getting a 45% chance of dealing a critical hit, which makes this a really powerful mid-game option. And something unique to the Hammer Burst is that it also comes with explosive bolts. Explosive bolts deal regular impact damage when they hit the machine, and then a couple seconds later also deal explosive damage, so it can be a really nice 1-2 punch. Here's a fun trick that works not just with explosive bolts, but with some of the other elemental bolts as well. If you have a canister rope caster, like the Elite Canister Rope Caster or the Tie That Binds Rope Caster, you can attach canisters to the machines. But typically hitting them with just your bow can be pretty tough. But because bolt blasters aren't the most accurate to begin with, it makes hitting the canisters a lot easier. So this can be a pretty fun combination to play around with if you're looking to switch things up. Okay, but now let's move on to the best very rare purple bolt blaster, starting with the Ice Storm. Now the Ice Storm Bolt Blaster isn't the strongest, but it's worth mentioning because it's an elemental bolt blaster that comes with frost, plasma, and shock bolts. We already know that frost is an incredibly powerful element to use in the Forbidden West because it essentially doubles your impact damage. You pretty much always want to make sure that you have at least one frost weapon equipped in your weapon wheel at all times. And because of the Bolt Blaster's rapid rate of fire, this is a great option to build up frost really quickly. One thing to note too, not just about the Ice Storm, but about all Bolt Blasters, whenever you're switching to a different ammo type, you'll need to reload, which can be really inconvenient mid-fight. To avoid that mid-fight, it's easiest to just switch to another weapon type that has the ammo you want, and then you'll avoid having to do that reload. The next purple Bolt Blaster, which I think is probably the best one, is the Relentless Bolt Blaster. The Relentless has both regular and advanced bolts as well as explosive bolts, so it's a good all-around damage option that can largely carry you through to the late game. The downside to the Relentless, however, are the weapon perks. Plus 15% overdraw damage is nice, but the other ones really aren't all that useful. But despite that, I would still say that this is probably the best purple Bolt Blaster in the game, so I highly encourage you to pick this one up when you have a chance. And the cost, 54 hunting ground medals, really isn't all that much. Now let's move on and talk about the best orange legendary Bolt Blasters. Now, as with pretty much any of the weapon types in Horizon Forbidden West, the orange legendary ones are going to be the best, strongest ones in the game. But typically, you're not going to get these until either very late in the game or even in New Game Plus, and they can be very resource intensive to buy or to upgrade to their max level, so they might not always be your go-to weapon of choice. But regardless, there are 3 legendary Bolt Blasters in the game, and they're all great in their own way. So let's talk about each of them, starting with the legendary Brawlbreaker. The Brawlbreaker is technically the strongest Bolt Blaster in terms of dealing impact damage, but despite that, dare I say it's also probably the weakest? The amount of frost damage it does is actually slightly less than the fully upgraded Ice Storm, but it does deal significantly more frost buildup. And in terms of explosive damage, it's only moderately better than the Relentless Bolt Blaster. And the weapon perks, well, those really aren't that great either. Concentration damage and overdraw damage are decent all-around damage buffs, and the multiple enemy damage is good if you're using the explosive bolts, but there's nothing in here that really stands out all that much. And to top it all off, you can only get the Brawlbreaker for Champions tokens in New Game Plus, which, considering some of the other legendary weapons that are available in New Game Plus, this one definitely isn't one that I'd prioritize. Next up is the legendary Eternal Vengeance. The Eternal Vengeance is the easiest of the legendary Bolt Blasters to get because you can purchase it in the Burning Shores for Brimshine and Shards. So if you have the Burning Shores DLC for PS5 or the Forbidden West Complete Edition for PC, you'll have access to this one once you get to the Burning Shores. Now this one doesn't deal quite the same amount of impact damage as the Brawlbreaker. In fact, it's the weakest of all the legendary Bolt Blasters in terms of impact damage. But it still is a decent step up from any of the very rare purple Bolt Blasters, and it has some great weapon perks. In particular, I really like the plus 25% close range damage, the plus 15% overdraw damage, and the plus 25% reload speed. It does also come with plus 2% instant explosion chance. Now in general, any weapon with a percent chance to deal something isn't typically a great option, but in this case, it's just an opportunity for additional damage. And finally, our last legendary Bolt Blaster, which I think is probably the best Bolt Blaster in the entire game, the Blast Forge. Yet again, this one doesn't deal quite as much impact damage as the Brawlbreaker, but it's only slightly less, and what it lacks in damage, it absolutely makes up for in weapons perks. This one comes with plus 65% draw speed, plus 15% critical hit chance, plus 15% overdraw damage, and plus 25% reload speed. I mean, even the plus 4% instant shock chance isn't bad. There are no bad weapon perks here, and with 5 coil slots, you can customize this one a ton of different ways to fit your playstyle and make this thing an absolute beast. A crit build on the Blast Forge, loading it up with critical hit chance coils and the elite critical hits coil that you can get in the Burning Shores, absolutely makes this not just one of the best Bolt Blasters, but one of the best weapons in the game. The only downside to the Blast Forge is the cost, which is 80 arena medals. That is really steep unless you're spending a lot of time in the arena. And there's also other weapons that you can get for arena medals that are pretty good. So where and when to prioritize this one really depends on your preference and playstyle, but it is totally worth it. And that's my list of top Bolt Blasters in the game. But wait, there's more. I also have videos that break down the top hunter bows, the best sharp shot bows, and the best spike throwers. So be sure to check those out and I'll link them in the description below. And if you like this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for even more Horizon Forbidden West content. Thanks for watching and I'll see you on the next one.